statements, policies of the Obama administration will have a much greater involvement of government in issues like climate change and energy policy than we ever saw in the Bush administration.
Also, when you talk a little bit about back to Croatia, the way that our government dealt with the problem of crisis, they basically introduced a new, we call it crisis taxes, and then they increase also the VAT for 1% in commerce. And is this a bad message that we are sending to the foreign investor or the domestic investor in that way?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated, well, I think there's a major difference between the United States and Croatia.
You were giving stimulus packages to your economy, and then switch to Croatia. It's different. We are even putting more taxes on the economy, basically, yeah. Well, and the consumers also. Yeah.
Right, and in the U.S. we are not really explicitly raising taxes yet. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that's viewed as political suicide to say we want higher tax in the United States. So as a result, the U.S. government's running enormous fiscal deficits. Now, the beauty is the U.S. as the financial capital of the world and the largest economy can run big deficits and at relatively low cost get the Chinese, the Japanese, Europeans to buy all this debt and refinance the debt. Croatia is a much smaller economy, has to be much more concerned about the size of the deficit, both because the difficulty of refinancing the debt and deficit, but also as it moves into the European Union, it can't move into the European Union with an expanding deficit and debt. I think the lesson that may be there for Croatia and these higher taxes is government spending is critical, and we'd have to spend more government money, more people's money really, to stimulate the economy in 2009 and 2010, but there's no free lunch. We have to pay for it. That is, you, Croatian investors, need to pay for it. So I think these will slow down development, to be sure, in Croatia, but it's on the one hand, it slows down development. On the other hand, we need to reduce the deficit in order to be able to finance the debt and refinance the debt, and also in terms of meeting the basic standards of the EU.
Another question which is also related to the government is the public administration reform that we have been waiting for a long time, how to do it. You're also dealing with public policies. Basically, what advice would you give to the Croatian government how to deal with this reform? Should they start doing it and not wait, because they're hesitating of being afraid of the social controversy that will also create in the society, Croatian society, and how to deal with the unions and other aspects of this problem?
I'm not an expert in this, but clearly Croatia went through a painful, short-run adjustment process, now 15 years ago. It is going to go through another painful adjustment process when it moves a little closer into the EU. And I think the basic issue is, do we want to take the medicine all at once and then move on, or do we want to take the medicine over a long period of time and suffer for a long period of time?
So what would you advise?
My advice is to take the medicine full dose right now. There'll be more unemployment, some bankruptcies, some changes, but the long run, things will improve.
At the university that you work, there is also a colleague of yours that that this year got a Nobel Prize for the economy, Elinor Ostrom. Can you tell us a little bit more about the reason why she got the Nobel Prize?
Yeah, Eleanor, or she usually goes by Lynn Ostrom, has been a faculty member at Indiana University all her professional life. I think she came to Indiana University in 1964, so more than 40 years later, 45 years, I guess exactly, she's still there. Excuse me. She basically focused her research and her investigation on something that a lot of economists typically don't look at. We usually look at government ownership, privatization. Her issue and her research focuses on, let's call it a third way. Is there something besides privatization, running on private markets, or government ownership? And if for certain particular problems, where it might be fishing rights or air pollution control or irrigation systems, she essentially said local networks making decision-making from the bottom with communication, agreements, informal arrangements, that kind of system can solve many problems. And they're not U.S. problems per se. They can be European problems. She's also done a lot of problems, or a lot of projects in Africa, in developing economies.
Is there any examples, clear examples of how it can work in a community?
Well, the classic case is sort of the tragedy, the problem of the commons, when essentially a situation when everybody owns an area, land, everybody can use the land, whether it could be a national park or fishing rights in the Adriatic. There's always a tendency, people individually, to overuse the park, or overuse or overfish in the Adriatic. So this would be essentially analyzing how do fishermen collaborate and communicate to make sure they don't overfish. And her conclusion is you don't need government and you don't need somebody to own the Adriatic to solve that problem.
And coming back to the beginning of our conversation, how big is really a role of education in this transition of the society from the whole, not only society, but the business, especially business part of the society, from one way of doing businesses and then to modern way of doing businesses in 21st century, and especially role of future managers?
I think education is absolutely central, and the advanced business education is central to that, and continuing education. I think it's not like you go to school and then you've learned it all. I think a critical element is you've got to continue to learn, and you can continue to learn by formal programs like we have at the IGBS, but it also can be informal by checking websites, reading newspapers, communicating with others, reading blogs, thinking, looking at best practices. I think one of the key aspects of education that I stress to all students back at my home university is when you graduate, that's a beginning. It's not the end to your education. You're going to educate for the next 40 years.
You have to stay active with your mind.
Right. The economy is moving, society is moving very, very quickly. Nothing's the same. And if you stop your education, you'll be behind very, very quickly.
Professor Jaffee, thank you for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Dear viewers, you stay and continue watching Capital Network.